guest. Christine is a licensed clinical social worker. She provides therapy for trauma, depression, anxiety, grief and loss, domestic violence, chemical dependency, and marital problems. So if anybody needs to see her, you can sign up. It's gonna be a long line. You're still practicing, right? She has an office in PG, and she's going to present the Enneagram. A lot of people are interested in it. Yeah, like some people came for that. I want to know more about Enneagram. So
Interesting, I know.
okay, great. Okay, Christine.
So I'm really happy to present the Enneagram because I haven't presented it for many years. I love it so much. So I'll just, how many people are familiar with it? At least a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay. So you know that it's a circle with some triangles, but I'm going to pass these around just so you can look and have an idea of what it looks like. And then I just want to tell you a little bit about the founders of the Enneagram. So the person responsible for bringing the Enneagram symbol to the modern world was Gurdjieff. How many have heard of Gurdjieff? Okay, good. So he was a Greek Armenian born around 1875, and he was a therapist and became interested in esoteric knowledge. And he, along with some of his friends, shared a passion for recovering the lost science of human transformation. So he developed this group called Seekers After Truth, and there are a lot of books on Gurdjieff, which I've read some of them. They're very interesting. And then actually, but there were two other people who were very responsible for what's happening today with the Enneagram. The first is Oscar Akizo. So he was fascinated with uncovering lost knowledge, and he was from Bolivia. And then there was another one named, I can't remember his name, but anyway, the other one was in Berkeley, and he was a Gestalt therapist, and he came to some of my groups when I was studying Gestalt therapy, and we got to ask him about the Enneagram and how he did therapy with each person with whatever they were struggling with in their experience via the Enneagram. So, would you like me to pass out some information about how we can figure out what our Enneagram types are?
Sure.
Okay, you probably, how many of you already know your Enneagram type? Okay. All right, this will be fun. So I'm going to pass out some pages with paragraphs on it with different types. And then what you do is you figure out which type in each of these paragraphs, which of all these types you relate to the most. And then that type has a number on here. And I'm going to give you a list of the numbers. And that'll tell you what your type is. But if it doesn't make sense to you, then we can talk about it. Maybe this test didn't work for you.
Could you say a little more about why that you feel the Enneagram is so important for all of us to know? It's kind of a personality test in a way.
Yeah.
And how it helped you in therapy. I'm sorry to butt into your talk,
No,
but
that's perfect.
I think that might be helpful to
Yes.
people.
The Enneagram's been very helpful to me personally and professionally. And when I was in therapy, like maybe 40 years ago, my therapist said, you need to study the Enneagram to find out why you're involved with such a person as you are involved with. It was so helpful to me, and it helped me look at myself and work hard on this certain part of myself that would be interested in someone like that. And then it said very clearly to me about what the other party's situation was. That type of person is not good for me. But also, it helps me in my professional life with clients because it's helpful to them. You know, sometimes I help them figure out what their type is, and it's called all different things. Like each type has a chief maladaptive feature, if you want to call it that. It's not too serious in some, but it's more serious, I guess, for other people. But mine is, I'm the 4 type. They have all different names, the artist or the envy or whatever. So, the thing I have to keep struggling with, and I've gotten better, thank God, because I'm a little bit older now, is wanting whatever's unavailable. Like if I'm here right now, I'm thinking about, well, I'd rather be somewhere else. And it you know, could apply to many situations. So I've had to struggle with that, being content with what is. Yes.
Can I ask if you have a preference? Does it evolve as you grow?
Yes, definitely. Yes, for me and for everyone.
Is there a dominant type though?
What do you mean? Can you say a
Well,
little bit more about that?
If there's a strong preference, which becomes dominant in your personality or your behaviors, do you learn over time to adjust or adapt?
Yes, yes, definitely.
Kind of.
One becomes more aware of it and notices what's happening and works really hard on oneself, whether in any way spiritually or any other way. Yes.
May I add something to that?
Yes, please.
So some things I thought were interesting. It was about like 2015, 2016 that someone, like a friend of mine, tested me on the Enneagram, and I reported it as an unhealthy 2. I didn't really know what that meant. I was like, apparently, like I'm unhealthy. But then later I learned that each number, you see the linking things are connected. There's like maybe an unhealthy, or like if you're an unhealthy version of your number, you'll look like a certain number.
The arrows go a certain way.
Yeah.
I'll just tell you about mine. So with a 4, when I'm in a healthy mode, and this is so true, I'm like the positive parts of the perfectionist. My room is clean and organized, and all my papers are in order. If I'm in an unhealthy state, I'm more like an unhealthy 2, which is the helper, which is being overly concerned with what other people think of me, or trying to help other people in ways that aren't really necessary.
Over exerting yourself to help others.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a healthy part, and then we go in an unhealthy way sometimes.
There's also the wings. So for each number, the number on either side of them, like I'm more of a 4-wing 5, but you have both wings. So, and each of those wings has more of a distinct character to them. And so, but you do have both wings. You may just rely on one of those wings more than the other.
And we grow out of our unhealthy focuses of attention. We could, and many people do, but some don't, unfortunately.
I see one more comment.
Yeah.
I just heard a lecture of Dr. Witt from Ohana,
Yeah.
the new mental health
The child
facility.
Yeah.
And she seemed to indicate that one of the most important things in mental health is what she called a internal nexus of control. So it's the idea that I believe in myself. I have a strong sense of my self-esteem and my capability, my sense of efficiency or effectiveness. And she said, when people grasp that concept, they seem to overcome a lot of their mental issues.
Yeah, they become aware of their potential and how they can handle situations, their agency. Yep. So I have a group of friends who's familiar with the Enneagram, and it's really fun, chatting with them, because it's a shortcut way of saying certain things. Like, what did you think of so-and-so? And I thought, well, he's a healthy such and such. And then when you get to know the Enneagram really well, it's easy to spot certain types, like the 8, the boss type. It's either a man or woman with a lot of masculine energy, right? You know about the Enneagram, right?
Yeah, I think look at the types. Like there's also like a podcast I listen to where it's kind of like more from a counseling approach, and so it's interesting to hear about. I mean, not to be like selfish, but I'm often like looking at the numbers I'm linked to kind of understand what those numbers go through. I don't have I mean, I enjoy all different kinds of self-understanding. So I'm kind of doing this Venn diagram in my head of like Myers-Briggs, Enneagram, psychometrics, and like trying to like, you know, locate.
Good idea, that's good.
And yeah, I'm open, and regardless of like, even if it's esoteric or whatever, I'll always
So everybody
take it
have-
in and process how it might be revealing.
What are those?
You're talking about dominant. I found and you may have this experience because you're just getting exposed to it, a lot of you. I found that I could identify with each one when I
Yes.
read it.
Right,
And so then it was going back around and looking at what was the most dominant one. And then the wings that you brought up. So I'm a 2, which is the helper. And then the wings are the scholar on the one side and then the reformer on the other, and 1 and 3. But it took me, this was about a 3-month class I went to where there was a discussion every
interesting.
night. You may have known the person who taught it in PG maybe 25 years ago. And it took all that experience and digesting for me to finally come around and say, okay, I'm this and I'm that, but I'm more of this, you know.
Interesting, yeah,
And
that,
then-
that happens sometimes.
Yeah.
But did you say you ended up being a 2?
Being a 2, yeah.
I see. That sounds like the 9, also the mediator. They can't figure out what type they are usually because they didn't have permission as children to be who they were. 7?
Definitely a 7, but I definitely have 9 tendencies and some 2 tendencies.
Uh-huh. Can you tell them what you know about being a 7?
Oh, well, you know, I read the paragraph H, and I didn't know which ones were which until I looked back, but H really resonated with me, you know. I'm optimistic. I enjoy doing different things. I move from other places. I move easily from one thing to the other. And I like to do things that are interesting. But once I start losing interest, I want to move on to the next thing, and I don't want to dwell on stuff that I've already finished dealing with.
Right, and let me ask you this. What about, because some 7s, you know, are extremely forceful about being happy and keeping the subject cheerful and everything, but some are evolved 7s where you can hear other people's sadness without changing the subject.
Yeah, no, I think I definitely don't need to force things into a positive energy. I'm perfectly okay when things aren't positive. I just, for my own personal stuff, I'm enthusiastic about whatever I have to do. So, for instance, if something comes up that I have to deal with, I find a way to look at the silver lining kind of thing.
It's great, it's a good quality, isn't it?
Mark, for what it's worth, I just saw a documentary on Leonardo da Vinci, and he was the same way. He never finished a lot of his paintings because he was so interested in everything else.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got a couple of books in the works.
That's good.
So you're Leonardo.
Yeah.
Did anyone have trouble figuring out what type they?
So a question. So I've taken the test like 3 times,
Uh-huh.
and each time it's different.
Yeah.
But there are like maybe 7 years in between. So at the beginning I was 5, and that kind of fit my profession.
Right.
Yeah, and then turn into number 1, and that seemed like right thing at that time. But now I'm 7, so that's kind of perfectly what I'm doing right now. Like,
Yeah,
enthusiastic
that makes
with that.
sense.
Yeah, so I think so that means I have all the elements. Just one thing comes out at certain stage of life, or
Yes.
whatever that occupation, whatever I'm doing at that time.
Yeah, and then with the 5, usually they're very well read. I'm not even going to ask you about your personal. I just want to talk to the group about the 5s. They're usually very well read, and you can ask them about almost any subject, and they're either knowledgeable about it or interested in learning about it. But we all have a negative side, right? The 5 is stingy with themselves, and they're not like that. The 5, if you go up and ask them something, they don't want to give it to you. With money, either money or their time especially. So, but I have so many friends who are 5s and they're so knowledgeable. And people go to them for help with things like that, but then sometimes when you want to act with them, they don't like being intruded upon.
Do you know what I found
What?
the easier way to do this for myself,
What?
because I've never done this, is read until I get the sentence that I'm absolutely not.
Good
Rather
idea.
than to
Right.
say a little bit of that, a little bit of that, it's like absolutely not. Yeah.
And did you come up with anything that sounds like it might fit for you?
Possibly a 5, but I haven't read them all yet. I think I stood up at one of Eddie's gatherings here and said my superpower is that I'm never bored,
Mhm.
and that is it, one of these.
Yeah, that makes, do you read a lot, by the way?
Used to.
What?
I used to.
Oh, you're used to.
I talked about a book being my formative
Yeah.
experience.
So, as I said, I found it helpful in certain ways. Like, I can always identify someone who considers themselves the boss or the leader. And I know I don't like being closely involved with that kind of person because I've had bad luck with it. But I know how to help them because I know they want to be in charge of things. So when they give advice, even though I might have a better or a different idea, I don't even bring it up. Because I know they're going to do things their way. And these are very effective managers. So, like that.
So do you have any resources that you recommend if you want to know more about it?
Yeah.
This book I guess the book you mentioned that you can repeat,
Um,
or website, or
Yeah.
a certain person.
The book's by Helen Palmer. And this book is very helpful too. See, these are some of the names of the Enneagram of people who have really made contributions. This is called The Wisdom of the Enneagram. And that's like one of our Bibles, really. And then another person is David Daniels. I think he's written other books. He just wrote this little one. But he was a therapist in Redwood City many years ago. I'm not sure if he's still working on it, but he's so knowledgeable about the Enneagram. I'll pass these around.
Well, I think Ospensky did some work here in California, back in the 60s and 70s, and he was a big Gurdjieff writer.
Really?
Ospensky, I don't remember his first
That
name.
name sounds familiar. Yep.
Question, in mental health therapy, is the anagram the preferred?
No, not
Pattern?
necessarily. No, it's
No?
just one of a huge bag of tools that therapists might want to use,
Yeah.
depending on who they're working with.
I've worked with the government, counseling, and the government prefers Myers-Briggs.
Yeah, that's good
That's the gold
too.
standard for them, yeah,
The government?
yeah.
The VA, right? You work with the
VA,
VA.
yeah.
Yes.
And in Myers-Briggs, there are 16 combinations,
Yeah.
and they look at it as a house
Mhm.
with 16 different rooms. And you go into, well, I like to stay in the kitchen because it's the place where all the food is and it's warmest.
Right?
But I go into the living room, I go into the bedroom, so all those are personality types, and we
Yes.
use those throughout our lives.
I think that's very helpful too. Well, I worked for the VA for 7 years. I think you
Wow.
know that, in Menlo Park with the outpatient, with the Vietnam vets. And I used the Enneagram all the time.
Okay.
It worked well there too, at the VA at that time.
Wonderful.
I found the Myers-Briggs helpful for a certain kind of self-understanding, especially like intuition, judgment, like sense, like all those things are just like, like being able to see a reflection of yourself and how you process things. And then I think the Enneagram was more important, like I guess motivations or like the thing,
Yeah.
something like we were talking about, like those maladaptive, like struggling things.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
These two also, Renee, whatever her name is, and Elizabeth Weigel, they're famous too in the Enneagram world. But the main one I go to is the first one, the larger one with the blue cover. That's my Bible.
So I have a question. These are self-determined. You had us read
Yes.
the paragraph and we
Yes.
said what we were.
Yes.
What do you do as a therapist when someone says, I'm a 5, and you say, no way?
Well, here's what happens. Okay, I'll tell you what happens. We never say no way, but we're usually very tuned in because that's why we're in this field in the first place. So, here's an example of what might happen. The 3 is the type who, if they're in an unhealthy state, they have no self-esteem except for what they do. That their name is a performer. Okay, so I've had clients like that, and sometimes I'll talk to them about that. Like, I knew this client was a 3. She had 0 self-esteem except for anything she accomplished. So I didn't mention the Enneagram, but I talked to her about that, and she said, no, that's not me at all. They're not ready to look at it quite yet. So you just stay and you keep spending time with them and helping them the best you can.
Anybody ever done a collaborative study with Enneagram to Myers-Briggs to
No,
see?
but that, I don't know of any, but maybe.
I've seen things on the internet where like it's a certain like a percentage of a Myers-Briggs type is usually like a certain Enneagram.
Yeah.
Like,
Really?
I've seen that, but really, yeah, you're getting into like how that research is being conducted, or
Yeah.
It's somewhat similar in the sense that in order to choose your personality type in Myers-Briggs, you read a paragraph and you say this one
to help.
reflects mostly what I believe and behave
Uh-huh.
like, so similar.
There's like often like the tests. There's like free tests that maybe ask you like 20 questions or something. And I think
Oh, really?
I think there are tests for the Enneagram online where you pay like $10 or something, and that's like a little more thorough.
Oh, really? Okay.
But the same would be, I think, probably for like psychometrics or something. Except on like psychometric tests, which are, those are tests that like psychologists use, and they're trying to be as like measurable as possible, so they get kind of close.
So one thing that happens when people first take the Enneagram test, especially with women, they see the title, the helper, and they want to identify with that. That's not a good thing. The unhealthy type of the helper is not healthy for them. But thank you so much, everybody, for listening.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.